At Vinsys, we think there are 4 critical steps in order to win a deal. The last one is the last 15 minutes of the sales cycle, when you're in front of a prospect trying to convince that prospect to be your client. Now, there are lots of things that we do at Vinsys in order to help you be effective at the point of delivery of a presentation, but the single biggest mistake people make is the way they structure the information in their sales presentations. So let's have a look at some presentation theory. When should you present the key information? If you want people to remember it, where in the pitch should it be? At the front? At the end? Where? So we did some research judging where people remember information, and therefore where should we put the critical pieces of information in the information flow. And it doesn't look like what most people think. Most people think it either starts high and tails off or starts low and picks up. And what we found is that actually in the first 3 to 4 minutes, people aren't necessarily paying attention. They're thinking about the last meeting or the next meeting. Then it plateaus. If it's an individual, one moment they're paying attention, next minute they're looking out the window away with the fairies. And if one person goes very quickly, the rest of the group follow. The average attention span is probably 20 to 30 minutes. We can tell you how to judge it and how to gauge it, and you're going to change it for the time of day, for the complexity of material, all sorts of things. But on average, 20 to 30 minutes. And we have yet to find anything, and we've done 20,000 presentations, that you can't sell effectively in 20 minutes. Somewhere between the time at which you start the presentation and they start to pay attention, they make a decision. We call that decision initial purchasing decision, because they're deciding whether or not to buy into you and the content and the presentation, not necessarily whether they're going to buy the product or service. And this decision colors how they view the rest of the communication. If you get them and they go into a positive framework, a positive mindset, we call that application hunters, because those people are looking for applications for the information you've just delivered. If you lose them, they go into what we call hole hunting. So they start to look for the flaws in the argument. What aren't you saying? What didn't you say? Your lips are moving, therefore, as a salesperson, you must be lying, therefore, and they start to try and critically examine the logic of your argument. The point is, how you present in the first 4 to 5 minutes will colour how they view the rest of the information flow. So it's beholden on us to make sure that the first 4 to 5 minutes are effectively used to get people in a positive frame of mind. So we'll come back to the attention span in a minute. Let's talk about how you sell. Now, it doesn't matter which scheme you use. It doesn't matter whether you believe in solution selling or spin selling or Bosworth, Huthworth, Rackham. They're all kind of the same. They all say that sales is a process, and that if you follow a process, you're much more likely to win deals. And we would agree, but we've just anonymized the process. These are the steps, regardless of how you've been taught it. These are really the steps that you need to go through in a point of sale interaction in order to get a deal. First thing is you have to establish empathy, because people buy with people. Then you have to establish your credibility, your company's credibility, and then the credibility of the product or service that you're selling. Then sales is all about features, advantages, and benefits. Now, at this point, we kind of digress just a little bit, because we think there's something quite complicated going on in the benefit statement bit. It's not just as simple as, is there a benefit? So we think there are 3 stages to this. The first stage is a feature benefit switch. So is this a feature that I need? So for example, we have the ability to turn presentations around in 24 hours for people. But if you don't have a major pitch in 24 hours, that's not a benefit to you. And therefore, there would be no sale on the basis of our ability to churn 30 slides very quickly. If you do have a need for it, and you've just called us up and you need some service in the next 24 hours, then maybe it's a benefit. But the next stage is, well, do you believe that we can execute it? If you believe that Vinsys is, one person, in one location, in one time zone, then, maybe you don't believe we can execute this. But when you understand that we can, then maybe you do. If you don't, no sale. Because you're not going to give me the contract. Trust me with your presentation if you don't believe I can execute it. But if we get you over the hurdle and you do believe that we can execute it, then there's the third stage, and that's, well, can you afford it? And often the can you afford it isn't the money associated with us turning the slides around. It's the commitment and the time and the energy and the trustworthiness from you to hand it over to us for us to do it. And again, if you get through that hurdle, then, maybe you get a sale. So, going from a feature to an order, has these three distinct phases in the buying psychology. We call them evaluation, where they're evaluating whether or not they need this, the justification, where they're evaluating whether or not you can deliver it, and then finally, where they're evaluating whether or not they can afford the consequences of it. Interestingly, in most people's presentations, evaluation and negotiation are pretty much sorted. We're quite good at teaching salespeople that, but in our estimation, this bit, the justifying your ability to deliver the value, is not well understood. And I say the value because often what people's presentations do is happily justify the capability, but often the client isn't buying the capability, the client is buying the benefit of the capability. And so your case studies really have to prove the value that you're delivering, not your ability to deliver the service. Once you've done that, then you're going to have a trial close. Hopefully you're going to get an objection, because it's difficult to sell to somebody who has no objections. So then we're going to get a Q&A where we're going to isolate the objection and say, well, apart from that, if I could solve that, would you give us the business? Okay, let me show you how we solve that bit, and then you get the order. So if that's how you structure a sensible sales conversation, let's make that look like a sales presentation. We're going to have an introduction where we're going to do empathy and credibility, then the value proposition where we're going to say, this is what's in it for you. Then we're going to prove our ability to deliver the value, then wrap up with the value proposition again, ask for the order, isolate, close, and get the order. That's what the presentation looks like. So let's put those two bits of theory together. If we want to influence the IPD, we want to make sure that this bit influences the audience positively, so that they are thinking positively about applying the application of the information we're giving them in a constructive way, then we want to do something around this point here in order to influence that decision. And obviously that should be the value proposition. And it should sit here, not at the front when they're not paying attention, right, but at the point at which they're critically deciding whether or not this is a good use of their time or not. We probably want to repeat it before they fall asleep and ask for the order, so that kind of limits it, and we want to get it there, at the end of the presentation. That means the bulk of the presentation is about proving our ability to deliver the value to the client, and then we're going to have the Q&A when the financial guys ask the financial questions so everybody else can fall asleep, and then when we finish, we bring them back and ask for the order at the end. And that means the last thing we write when we're helping people write presentations is the intro, where we do credibility and empathy. And bear in mind, this bit here should last no more than 4 to 5 minutes. So we're trying to establish credibility and empathy very, very quickly, maybe 1 to 2 minutes. And the reason this works is that predominantly, if this is what we're doing, most people's sales presentations look like this. They start to build the empathy and the credibility, and it ends up being a list of, here's what we do, here's where we do it, here's our locations, here's our offices, here's our services, here's everything that we think is good about our organization, all of our capabilities, all of our products, all of our services, all listed in the presentation. And if you look at it, maybe you need to look at your presentation, what you'll find is you might have 30 PowerPoint slides that all talk about how great you think you are. And then typically there'll be a slide somewhere near the end of the deck, just before the Q&A, that says, oh, and the benefits to you are, and then we feature list all of the features that we think might be of interest to the client. And so this presentation is sort of characterized by me, we. It is all about you and your organization and what you do. Whereas our flow is slightly different. There's a little bit of we, but then, 3 minutes in, it's, what, you don't care about us. What you care about is, how can we drive value for you, and how can we prove to you that we can deliver that? You. So this presentation is largely about, this is what we have, and this presentation is largely about, this is what you need. And what we find is that these win about 1 in 3, and this structure wins about 3 in 4. Now, we have it underpinned by 3 bits of IP. OQS is our IP that makes sure that every PowerPoint slide is engaging and can make people pay attention. VCD is our technology for creating dissonance so people listen and therefore process and therefore remember. And passive mnemonic processes is our way of guaranteeing, if you tell me what 5 things you want the client to remember, We call that a value proposition. We can guarantee the client will remember it. We can't guarantee that they're going to win, because if you're in at 46 million and the client's only got $12 million to spend, then it doesn't matter how good your presentation is. But we can guarantee that when they walk out of the room, they can remember your value proposition. And that's what those bits of technology are about. If you do that, then you are much more likely to win. And that's important because at Vinsys, we believe winning is everything.